I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from Kathleen Zellner's theory of how Bobby Dassey, I guess, got the blood from Steven's trailer from his sink, because there's a couple parts that I don't really understand really what she's getting at. She says, at that point, Avery's cut, which she's talking about the cut on his finger, was almost 2 weeks old, but it split open, moving the Dassey trailer, and the only person that saw that was Bobby Dassey and the other brother. I don't know, it was Brendan, I think, but they went on the errand with Steven and his other brother Chuck. So the only person left there was Bobby Dassey, and that's the night the blood was removed, and the Dasseys had a key to Steven's trailer, and Steven saw the taillights once he was exiting the property. You could not have got another vehicle up there other than the Dassey vehicle, which was right next door. So he has to have removed the blood, and I think because he did that, he's got to be involved in the murder. Okay, since that was the night that Steven saw the taillights by his house, I guess the errand she's talking about is when Steven and Chuck go to Menards, I guess, to get the lumber. And she says, Bobby Dassey and the other brother, I don't know, it was Brendan, I think, but they went on the errand with Steven and his other brother Chuck. So the only person left there was Bobby Dassey. And everything that I've listened to, all the interviews of Steven, Brendan, and Chuck, the only two people that is ever mentioned going to Menards is Chuck and Steven. Brendan is never mentioned, going. So I don't know if that's if she's saying that that's the night they went to Menards and Brendan went with them, because that was on November 3rd. That was the same night the night that Steven saw the taillights by his house. The other things I don't really understand is what she means by you could not have got another vehicle up there other than the Dassey vehicle, which was right next door. So my question to this is, why would Bobby drive his vehicle to Stevens? It's right there. He could have just walked over there. I don't understand why he would have drove his vehicle to Stevens' house. If that's what she's saying. By reading this, that's what I'm gathering from it. Maybe that's not what she means, but that's what it says. Could not have got another vehicle up there other than the Dassey vehicle, which was right next door. So he has to have removed the blood, and I think because he did that, he's got to be involved in the murder. But Brendan was never mentioned going with Steven and Chuck. It's always been Steven and Chuck was the only two that went that night. Brendan actually is never mentioned. Steven never mentions Brendan in any of his three police interviews. Maybe the only time I can remember him mention Brendan's name is when I think it was it was either on the November 5th or 6th, when the detective was asking Steven about Barb, how many sons Barb had, and he named them. Other than that, I can't recollect Brendan's name even being brought up. I also can't remember Steven ever mentioning the blood in his sink, and coming home and it not there. That's never mentioned in any of the three interviews that he gave to the police. So, basically, when it comes down to it, it depends on who you believe. Do you believe Bobby's story, or do you believe Steven's? Which Steven mentions Bobby several times during his interview, but he never mentions Brendan. Even the night that when Chucky was going up north and Brendan was with Chucky that night, and Chucky saw headlights by his place, Steven says that him and Bobby went to check it out. But when they questioned Bobby about it, Bobby says that he didn't, that he didn't go with Steven. But that's just something that I was reading here of what Kathleen Zellner had said, and maybe I'm not getting her point, or maybe I'm not reading it right or something. I don't know, but it just doesn't make any sense unless Steven. I mean, he doesn't mention Brendan going with him and Chuck, or Chuck doesn't mention it either. Brendan doesn't mention it, so maybe somebody could fill me in on this, because according to Steven's police interview, it couldn't have happened the way she's saying, because Brendan wasn't with them, and I don't understand why Bobby would have drove his vehicle right next door to Steven's. I mean, you could have just walked over there. It would have been a whole lot less suspicious if he walks over there instead of getting in his vehicle and driving to Steven's. I mean, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, unless the up there that she's talking about is not Steven's house. But anyway, that's all I have for now, and if anybody can enlighten me on this, feel free. Thanks.